So hello and welcome to my next video, and this video is driven by a request from my students who have problems with depicting a research model. That's why I'm going just to share with you some slides and going through the research models, how they can look like and what actually is important for the research model. And research model is actually the language of science. Whatever statement you have, you can translate it into a research model. So let's assume you say that ice cream cone makes people happy. You can translate this statement into the independent variable and dependent variable. The independent variable is the one that has impact on something, and dependent is the one that is being influenced. So if we say that ice cream makes people happy, actually the independent variable is the amount of ice cream eaten, and the dependent variable is the level of happiness. And you depict it, and this event is very simple, direct effect. That's why we need a direct effect model. We depict it as A has impact on B. And here I have this example, ice cream makes people happy, and we translate it into a hypothesis, because hypothesis is the language of science or academia, whatever type of science you're coming from. So the hypothesis will be the amount of ice cream cones increases the felt happiness. This could be an example. And if you depict it here, it will be the amount of ice cream, and here we will have the level of happiness. And we also, it is very important, need to indicate what kind of relationship it will be. That's why we write here our hypothesis 1. I assume you will have several hypotheses. This will be 1, and the relationship is positive. The more of ice cream I eat, the happier I will become. So it is a positive relationship. That's why you depict it in this form. There are different ways or different types of relationship. It can be negative relationship. The more you have of A, the less you have of B. So independent variable is always on the left and the dependent variable is on the right. I don't know why, but it's just a matter of tradition. So if the number of your independent variable or the amount of independent variable has a negative impact, then you write here minus. You can also have the U-shaped form or the reversed U-shaped form. It means if you don't have it, it's bad. If you have it, it's good. Actually, if you have too much of it, it's bad. And ice cream is actually a good example for this one. Look at these ice cream cones. If I give you 1, you get happier. Then if you have 0, if I give you 2, you get even happier. But if I give you 4, it's already in my event, I already start saturating. I cannot eat anymore. And by the 7th, I will start hating ice cream cones. So the level of happiness will drop. In this event, you introduce, probably we have to find it where it is, the symbol, and I'm pretty sure you can find a symbol for the reversed U shape. I don't know where to find it, but it's actually reversed U shape. Let's see how we can do it. Do we have the symbol for the reversed U shape relationship? Probably, definitely yes. The question is where it is. Let's go to symbols. Symbols, maybe here. Looks better. This is the reversed U shape relationship. So in this event, instead of a plus, you insert this type of relationship. And actually for the ice cream cone, it would be correct. The hypothesis will be formulated differently. It will say the amount of ice cream cones increases the felt happiness, yet after a certain number of ice cream cones, the level of happiness drops. This will be more or less the correctly formulated hypothesis. And how you do it to make it looking nice, sorry, it is a quickly prepared presentation. You do it like this, and then this will be a U-shaped relationship. This is how you formulate it. Now we go to the next type of effects that we have is the moderation effect or moderating effect. And a good example would be again the ice cream. Ice cream makes people happy. This is our A to B relationship. Yet the happiness level grows when it is warm. So there is a difference between eating ice cream cone in the winter, as we have now in Tyrol, so pretty cold, and I think I wouldn't be so happy. So probably it would be great to have an ice cream cone, but actually not so happy as during the summer in July or in August when the heat is there and each ice cream cone cools you down. In this event, we talk about a moderation. It means there is a condition under which the relationship that we observe, the amount of ice cream cones, increases the felt happiness. We stick to simple, this positive effect. We don't take the U-shaped form. And the moderation effect would be this relationship is stronger the warmer the weather. How you depict it? Similar to the previous one, we have here our amount of ice cream. Let's make it consistent, ice cream. Here we have the level of happiness, and here we have the temperature. Sorry, I'm good at making typos. And this would be a relationship, the moderating relationship. How would it be described? We have to add always the hypothesis. So ice cream cones, they increase the level of happiness. So H1 will be positive relationship. And our H2, the higher the temperature, the stronger the relationship. So it will also increase this relationship. I position it here, and I just make a copy of it, put it here, and this will be our H2. And this will also be a positive relationship. The higher the temperature, the stronger this relationship, the main relationship that we postulate. Now we come to the next type of effect, which is the mediation effect. Mediation effect is an explanatory variable. So if moderation is about the condition under which something holds, mediation is actually why the relationship exists. And in the event of mediation, we introduce a variable that explains better what happens in the model than assumed. So our main assumption is ice cream cones makes people happy. It happens because ice cream contains sugar. So it is actually about the sugar, and we know from science that if people eat sugar, they feel happier. So in this event, actually, we can say that the amount of ice cream cones increases felt happiness. This is our main relationship. And the mediation will be this relationship is explained by. That's why mediation is also an explanative variable, additional variable that is introduced and that explains the relationship even better. Consumed with each ice cream cone. So this relationship is explained by the amount of sugar consumed with each ice cream cone. And here we have our relationship, which is the amount of ice cream. Amount. Here we have the level of happiness. And here we have the amount of sugar. To test the mediation, there are specific tests for this one, but actually to test the mediation, you have to run four tests. You have to run the main effect test, you have to run the test for this relationship, for that relationship, and for all three relationships together. And if you do it correctly, and if you introduce the amount of sugar and the significance of this relationship drops completely, then we speak about a full mediation. It means sugar explains the effect better than the amount of ice cream cones. If it drops only partly, then we have the partial mediation. How will it be depicted? We take again our hypothesis. This will be H1, and it is a positive relationship. We simplify it. Then we have the H2. Actually, it will be not H1. It will all belong to H2. So probably in this event, for the mediation, you have to split it into three sub-hypotheses. So it will be H2A, and it will be positive. The more ice cream, the more of sugar. Then the next one will be here. The more of sugar, B, the more of happiness. And finally, this is called the relationship A, B, C, and when you introduce all three, it is called the C sharp. If you search for different mediation models, how to explain it will be explained in this one. This is the A path, B path, this is the C path, and with the mediation is C sharp. So the path alone is C, but if you introduce additional variable in your model, it will be the C sharp. So actually the main H2 hypothesis will happen here, and H2 will be also plus. So the amount of sugar has impact because the amount of ice cream has impact on the level of happiness because of sugar. So it's kind of weird way to describe it. That's why usually if I have the mediation hypothesis, I do it in two ways. Either I formulate it as a three hypothesis, sub-hypothesis. The first one, the amount of ice cream cones increases sugar. I'll just show you how you do it. This would be how you can do it, or how I usually do, because it's sometimes simpler to depict. H2 mediation. This relation explains the amount of sugar in I would say each ice cream cone increases the level of, or the amount of sugar, level of sugar probably because it's in blood, level of sugar, which will be A, which in turn increases happiness. This will be B, and sugar is thus a mediator in this relationship, and we call it C. Now let's make it looking nice. So, and this is how it would look like. So this is what I depicted right now. If you want to stick to this type of hypothesis and include all three into one, then in this event the model can be depicted a bit differently. I'll just show you how you can depict the model in this other form. Oh, sorry, works not as good as I wanted it to work. So we put it here. Then we put the third model, and actually the first hypothesis will remain. And we need only the second hypothesis, and I would depict it in the following way. I would take a curved line. No, I think you can do it without a curved line. You can make it very clever. I learned it in one of the journals. So now we connect this line with this one and make it as dotted line, which shows the indirect effect. And then I would put my H2 would be also plus. I would make it smaller and put it somewhere here. This is another way to depict it because you show the indirect effect. I also use different other ways to show the indirect effect, like making dotted line from one to another one. I think it was something like this, when you make a line from this one to this one, and then you, okay, didn't really work, sorry. I have to learn how to do it, but anyway, this is kind of making the indirect line that goes through the other one, but is the simplest way to depict it would be this one. And this is how you depict a mediation model. So now we go to the different other types. So there is not only moderation, mediation, but the we have the basic relationship: direct, mediation, moderation. And each of this relationship can be positive, negative, can be U-shape or reversed U-shape. But in real life, we have very complex models, and when my students prepare their thesis, they usually make a lot of theory, a lot of complex relationships, and I always ask them to depict them. It is possible to depict any complexity of the model if you understand these core ideas of direct effect, mediation, moderation. I'm going to show you some of the models that I had to deal with. This is the double mediation. It means there are two explanatory variables. In my recent paper with Susanne Schmidt from University of Magdeburg, we had a triple mediation, which is very seldom model because it's kind of very complex model, even for top researchers who try to avoid too complex models. They are hard to argue and they're hard to test. I mean, statistically, you can test everything, but you need to be able to explain each of the relationships within the model. The double mediation is tested as, I think, 3 or 4 mediations models at once. So what I explained you with the A path, B path, and C path, but here you have also D and E path, and you have to test also the independent variable to the first mediator, independent to the second mediator, independent to the third mediator, and from each mediator to dependent variable. So it's a kind of very tricky to test. That's why I usually try to avoid it, or you need to argue very well. We can have the moderated moderation model. A good example would be ice cream cones have impact on the happiness. We know it. Now we know the warmth, the weather has impact, but there is also something that can reduce the effect of the increasing effect of the temperature, which is wind. If it is too windy, then the warm weather is felt not so warm, but the cold weather is felt actually much colder. Or you can take humidity. Humidity is also a thing that makes warm weather make very warm, be felt as very warm, and cold weather be felt as very cold. So the humidity could be, or the wind can be the moderators. As you see, you can add 2 moderators. You can add here both humidity and wind, and here temperature, ice cream cones, happiness. But imagine that you have to write theory for each of this. And for each relationship, you have to write at least half a page of the theory explaining why this relationship should exist. At least for bachelor thesis, but I think even for academic work, you need to have about half a page explaining the relationship. Otherwise, you won't be able to convince the reader or the reviewer why this relationship exists. You can have such models, mediated moderation or moderated mediation. Actually, this is the moderated mediation because mediation is the core and moderating effects appear somewhere here. And these models are also testable. There is a plugin for SPSS from Preacher and Hayes. Didn't work with the last version of the SPSS, but the previous one worked very well, where you can test something like this, or you can run structure equation modeling, which makes the testing very complex endeavor. And the second thing, which I tell my students also to bear in mind, not only that it's complex to describe, but it's you will need a much higher sample size. So for a simple relationship, A to B, you need about 60 people. So depending, let's say, gender, you have two groups, each group with 30 people represented. You can test the effects of gender, assuming that the effect is strong. If the effect is weak, you need to increase your sample size. With each additional arrow, you need to increase the amount of people on whom you tested. So for one additional line, I would increase it by 30 people at least. By two additional lines plus additional 15 people. By each additional step, I would take about 10 additional answers. At least. This is the minimum requirements, this is the rule of thumb. You can also calculate what is the correct sample using, for instance, a G-Power, which is a software from, I think, University of Cologne. It's a free plugin or a free tool that you can use to estimate your sample size. So you can test any complexity of the models. You can depict them, you can test them, but be aware that first of all, the more complex the model, the harder it is to explain. And the more complex the model, the higher sample size you will need. But depicting the model before you write your proposal or before you write a thesis is crucial, because first of all, you will understand much better what you test and what is where. And if you manage to depict it in this way, you also manage to explain it to a supervisor or to the reviewers or to the readers of the journal what actually you're testing. And here we come to the next trick that I learned at the Academy of Management conference about 3 years ago in the experimentalist workshop. And I said that actually, if you want to be cool, the model should look like this. And I completely agree with them. It is such a cool model. I'm trying to apply it now to all possible research. If I have some research to publish, I try to depict it at least for myself in this form. I suggest it also to my students, but honestly, only a few managed to depict it in this way. Because students, not only students, also professional researchers, they have a problem with differentiation between theory, hypothesis, and operationalization. And I just want to show you, this is a model. I just deleted some things. I want to show you how the lines look like and what do I mean by this, and then I'm going to give you an example. So first of all, the theory is actually, your theory will assume a certain relationship. And then you transform the theory into a hypothesis where you say the number of ice cream cones, or the amount of ice cream cones, or the amount of ice cream has impact on the level of happiness. And this is your hypothesis 1, and this hypothesis is, for instance, positive or negative. So let's assume it's positive. And there is a moderation effect, and this moderation effect comes from the temperature, and this effect is also positive. And why do you need these dotted lines? Because I want to show how you transfer this theoretic part from this point to this point, and how you transfer this theoretic part to this point, and so on. And finally, the last level is the operationalization, is how actually you want to measure it. So, for instance, here, I don't know what would be the theory for ice cream cones. I don't have any theory. That's why I just took an imaginary example, but the hypothesis would be the amount of ice cream has impact on the level of happiness. And the operationalization will be number of ice cream cones eaten has impact on the answer on the scale, Likert scale, about the happiness from 0, completely unhappy, to, let's say, 6, to the 7 scale, or from 1 completely unhappy to 7 completely happy. Or you take a 100 scale, whatever you're using. So this is actually how you want to measure it. Now an example from one of the students of mine. I simplified it in order to make no overlapping, but anyway, I think it will help you. He makes research on the impact of gamification on the learning behavior, and he has the hypothesis a bit different, but I try to reformulate them in the simplest way. The first hypothesis is that students who rely on gamification learn better than students who rely on conventional methods. So it means like if they have to read the textbooks. The second hypothesis is the feeling of competence, I think I'm making competence. You see how many typos I made. Competence communicated to students during learning increases the learning quality. The idea of the positive feedback and actually comes from the self-determination theory of motivation, which says that the feeling of competence increases the level of motivation and thus has impact on the quality of learning. And the third one is feeling of loss of competence strengthen the effect of communicated competence on learning quality. I tried to formulate it in this way. He formulated it much more complex. I gave him feedback that actually in the event of hypothesis you have to be very clear and everybody has to understand them. That's why this would be a simple way to communicate them. And now we try to depict them. First of all, as you see, this is the direct effect. This is the moderation, and this is the moderated moderation, which is already very hard. So he decided to go for this more hard option, but let's try to do it. So the theory would say that the gamification has positive impact on learning. And this effect is strengthened by the feeling of competence. Yeah. And the moderated effect would be the prospect. And the prospect comes from prospect theory. It means it's formulated as a gain or as a loss. So if you play a game and you can only get points, it's a kind of cool. But if you can also lose points, then prospect theory would suggest that actually the effects will be much stronger because we feel losses much higher than the gains. So then the hypothesis would be that the type of material, or material, in this event it is game versus text, has impact on the learning quality. And this effect is moderated by the communicated competence. Looks not so nice. Let's try to make it a bit nicer. Communicate competence, and this effect is actually strengthened by the loss versus gain of competence. Let's see, I'm not so consistent. Competence. Yeah. And the effects will be, here we have to specify the effects. Will be the hypothesis 1, which would say the type of material in this event. Let's say we talk about gamification. So if gamification is introduced, the learning is higher. That's why we formulate it as a plus. Then the moderating effect, the next one, would be the moderation hypothesis 2. This effect will be stronger if we communicate the competence level, also a plus. And now we need to somehow squeeze it here, which means that actually the losses will increase and the losses are negative. So probably gains are positive. So in this event, H3 will be negative. Again, it will depend on how exactly you formulate it. The feeling of loss of competence strengthens the effect. So actually loss is negative. So the less of competence you have, the stronger the relationship, if I formulate it simply. And this will be this H3 here, let's say, to make it a bit distinguishable. And now we come to the final stage, the operationalization, how you want to measure it. So I'm using British English. The type of material, we have the wine game versus I think he uses an article as a piece of article text, or piece of text from an article. The one team or one group of students will play a game which is based on the text that they received. The second group received just a plain text, and the next group has a text game based on this text. This is the experiment. And here we have this will be communicated. This communicate competence are the badges. They receive the badges. And as one group will receive no badges, they'll just play the game. So we'll have already 3 groups. And the next group will receive the badges. We'll just see, okay, you have gained 20 points on this one. It seems your competence is growing. You receive additional 10 points. So we'll have this badges, they will communicate it. And theoretically, the group with the badges will learn better than the group without the badges. So the badges. And here we have the positive versus negative pages, because we can say not only you gain points, you have lost points, you made a mistake, unfortunately this was not a good idea to make this decision. And then we assume that it will be tested in this way. And finally, quality of learning. At the end of the experiment, they will have to answer a bunch of questions, so this will be the score from a test. This is the operationalization. With this in mind, I just want to show you again, if you manage to depict it in this way, which is not easy, and sometimes we need really hours until we understand how exactly what is the theory, what is the hypothesis, and what is the operationalization. But if you manage to do it, first of all, to make any work better, if it is over complex, as you see here, it looks very complicated with all this moderated moderation, then you can report only one thing, only the hypothesis, but for yourself, to understand it better, I recommend you defining the theory level, hypothesis level, and operationalization level, and go through them. It will increase clarity in your head and make the delineation between what is the theory, what is my suggestion based on theory, and how I want to measure it. And yes, very good top journals actually they presented it as a good idea how to publish in a top journal to show a good understanding, good overview in one picture of what you're aiming to do is also very cool. But as you can see, complexity is high. It will work only with simple model. With simple mediation works perfectly, with simple moderation perfectly, as direct effects works even better. But if you have moderated moderation, as you see here, it makes this scheme already kind of overcomplicated. That's why pay attention and try to analyze it in the simplest form. Simplest way is always a good one. If your model is too complex, most likely you didn't get the point. So we need to focus. In research, we try to find one relationship, show that it holds, prove it, and this actually the small contribution that is really cool. Overcomplicated model makes it only confusing. I hope it is helpful. Wish you good luck with your research models, and remember I have a podcast where I also mentioned the different types of research models. I will leave the link to my podcast below. Just go to the search and search for research model, and you will find, I think, about 7 episodes on different types of research model. What it is, direct effects, mediation, moderation, moderated moderation, double mediation, and more complex models. So all this stuff is also there. And good luck with your research.